full screen like an error message. Like, Kat Wenske. No. I mean, that's all right. That's to be expected. I'm fine with that. Yeah, please, questions. What questions do folks have? Like, I'm super. Oh, Macmillan, thank you, buddy. What are the top 3 or 5 things? 3 or 5, you gotta pick one. What are the top 3 or 5 things you're looking for when reviewing someone's game audio portfolio? Good question. So first, did they read a job posting properly? Like, if I am specifically looking for, a VO editor, let's say senior VO editor, and this person sends me a resume and they are a composer, it's not what I wanted. That's gone. So, did they read the job description? Do they show potential? And by potential, I mean they don't have to have, every single bullet item check marked. I want to know if they are trainable and if they are a good person. Like, honestly, that's the big thing for me. If a person is not someone whom I believe I or my other coworkers could collaborate with, that's a huge problem because skill can be trained, but personality cannot. And the third one would be, all right, well, what have they worked on? And is there something there that is related to, what we're looking for? What kind of potential do they have there? Again, to me, I'm looking for potential. I'm not looking for, this person needs to only be doing AAA titles. Like, I've known, there's a person in Team Audio, well, there are several people in Team Audio that are younger nuggets that are so extremely skilled that I'll hear their sound design and I'm like, holy cannoli, like, what am I doing here? They're so good. And I think the big thing is understanding that there's so much you can learn from people fresh out of school, so much you can learn from people that have been in the industry for so many years. If you do not approach things like a student, then you are already behind. So I want someone without an ego is maybe the 4th and 5th one. What other questions we got? I think we're in a really new era too. Like right now at Team Audio, I have a female coworker, and this is the first time I've worked with a female coworker for so long. And last year I worked with a studio where there was another female sound designer. And this is just all new to me because I had been so used to being like one female in 60 coworkers that are male. And I love seeing how much things are changing now. I actually was at, I think there was like an event at UT for one of their game dev classes. And I didn't realize at the time, but I realized on my way home, like, yo, there was a pretty stellar divide of like a whole bunch of dudes, a whole bunch of females, and just a smattering of diversity. And I think that's so cool to think that you guys are like the new generation of developers, and knowing that change is happening over time and our industry is only going to get stronger because of you. I work with Girls Make Games as well. And over the summer, when was summer? I was teaching girls ages like 8 to 13 how to make games in Construct 3. And it was really cool because like some of them had already been working in other game maker software. I'm like, excuse me? Some already know they want to be like front-end developers. I'm like, what? And it's so neat, like hearing high schoolers already have classes geared towards game technology. Or, well, even just technology as a whole. Like, I think it's really cool. Like, we didn't, by way in myself, I didn't have cool things like that. I didn't really experience YouTube until way later in maybe at the end of college. I don't know anymore. So it's really neat seeing how much the landscape is changing for the better. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the new groups of developers upcoming. McMillan says Contract 3 is amazing. Yeah, it's really neat. Like if you just want to bang out something really quickly, it's pleasant because it's very, very, very visual. So it's like visual scripting light. So highly recommend checking that out if you are wanting to just kind of take a peek behind the curtain or just play around and look at stuff. What other questions we got? I'll just keep going until someone tells me to stop. So I mentioned earlier that coming from a traditional family, that was a little difficult. So actually, 4 years after I had graduated and already been in the industry, my parents, who are in the medical field, they're both nurses, as many Filipinos are, were telling their coworkers that I'm not a doctor, but I was going back to school to at least become a nurse. And that was so tremendously difficult for me because I was already doing something that I was almost, I guess, still unsure about. And to me, like the pillar of strength that should have been a pillar of strength most certainly was not, because they were so ashamed of my career choice. They were, obviously telling coworkers I was going back to school when I'm like, yo, totally not. I'm doing the thing that I'm proud of. And eventually my younger sister became a nurse, so they're happy there. But I can't imagine what it would have been like if I followed a non-creative path. I think being in the game industry is so incredibly rewarding, because we're in a field where we have to constantly be adapting. We have to constantly be adapting to new technology, to new ideas, to different, just a whole different world as a whole. And, thankfully, we're not having to deal with lives. You can't really experiment if you're a doctor, but if you're a game designer, you could totally experiment on your game mechanics, totally experiment on the types of sounds you're working on. And I think I'm very much a late bloomer to creativity. I had very, very much thought mainly in the box. Now I'm like an explosion of color, and it's been great. I really struggled trying to come up with ideas for sounds that were not literal, and now if I were to tell young me, like, yo, that light bulb's got a toilet, I'd be like, what? So it's neat kind of seeing that type of growth and where I've been and where I am now, and looking forward to future adventures as well. Mickey says, I'm glad you discovered Serum. Yes, totally. I was mentioning earlier, in case you missed it, I picked up Serum, which is oh my gosh, what word am I looking for? I guess it's a simp. And it's fantastic because I can use it to kind of make some old 80s anime sounds, and I'm really hyped about that. Mickey also mentions that pretty much similar background, but they're happy that their parents fully support the decision to go into game industry. That's fantastic. And I think that's great. A lot of times with, especially with minority groups, the struggle is that the game industry is something that is a lot different than what they're used to. And many times, like, parents want their children to exceed where they have been in terms of career choices, and to find a career that is stable. And saying I want to be in video games is confusing to them, because it's like, no, you can't play games all the time. It's like, that's not what it means to be working in video games. Nice try. But now it's different, because I feel like video games have become much, much, much more mainstream. The culture that we've started to bring with esports is new and confusing to a lot of older audiences, but it's exciting because it's opened the door for careers that didn't exist before. So I really dig it. Does your interest in audio, sound, or game fade over time as you work longer in the industry? I noticed so many burnouts in the game industry. That's a really good question. So I'd say my interest in audio has not um, faded because there's too many things about audio. Like, I could really, really focus on doing sound design, for however many years, or suddenly I could switch gears and really, really focus on field recording. And that's a whole other ball game. Like the way you can handle Foley recording and doing, field recording of gunshots and cars, or even smaller scale things of like recording food, things like that. Like, it's really exciting. Like, I actually, for a game, I was working on some fireworks sounds, and I just straight up went to the kitchen and recorded myself frying an egg and frying some rice and pouring soy sauce, because a lot of that actually makes a very similar sound to fireworks and different types of like Roman candles and things like that. So it's really neat to kind of find and explore different ways to be creative with sound. The thing that I don't like is when I start noticing sounds when I don't want to notice sounds. So if I'm watching a movie, for example, and I'm like, I really hate this door sound. I know this door sound because this door sound is used in like every show, sitcom, and lower budget movie. Like, it's the worst. I remember there was one E3 where I think it was like a Final Fantasy demo trailer, and I was like, hold up, what? Because I recognized the sound as a straight pull from the library. And I was like, no way for like an E3 thing. And lo and behold, like other sound designers were like, did this happen? Did this actually happen? I'm like, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. It really isn't really fun when you're noticing this when you don't really want to be noticing things. Macmillan says, I'm like that with the Wilhelm scream. I am totally like that. I do not find joy in adding that scream in anything, and I try and avoid that. I have a coworker, though, that instead of doing that, will use farts as textures, and will kind of sneak them into things. Like, well, yeah, that works. At least that's enjoyable, I suppose. Like, everyone likes a good fart, maybe like mixed low where you don't notice. I don't know. How much of your sound design material comes from library versus Foley versus software synths? Do you use any hardware synths? It really depends on the project. There was a project that I did recently where I only used recorded samples that I had recorded myself. Um, I also helped on a smaller title where I was making spider sounds, and a lot of that came from the sound of my mouth and a plethora of my dog's toys, and I did a lot of manipulation with that. And I've definitely used hardware synths as well. I don't use it as often. I usually, for me personally, a lot of times I will either use the library or recorded material that I've made and then manipulate that with either other types of like VSTs or other plugins to really change that into something else completely. How do you like freelancing? How do you like your freelancing career so far? It's a good question. So it was horrifying at first when I switched over because, again, I actually am a person that really likes structure. And I think a lot of that is just from that traditional background where, you're kind of used to things happening a certain way. I'm also an excessive worrier. So going freelance was really terrifying, but it ended up being extremely, extremely rewarding. Um, the hardest thing when I first started going freelance was not knowing when the next gig would come. And so whenever something would pop up, I'm like, all right, let's go. And I picked up too many things and was just really, 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 really overworked to where some of my friends were like, hey, you doing okay, buddy? But I formed some really meaningful relationships on some of the projects I worked on. In fact, one of my freelancing gigs was through QC Games that was here in Austin. QC Games has since folded, but the audio director there, Ariel Gross, um, is my current boss over at Team Audio. And we had jived really well, and he went and formed his own company and asked if I wanted to hop on board. And it's been fantastic. So again, with Team Audio, we're technically all still contractors and freelancers, but I really, 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 really dig it, because working at Team Audio has been a joy to me. Like, I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's so incredibly rewarding. I am There's an amount of reward that I did not have before. I have a strong ability to be able to help people grow, and to also push for change where change is really needed, and to form relationships with clients in meaningful ways that a lot of studios might not, expect. A lot of times people think about freelancers and contractors as people that just throw assets over the fence. And I don't like that, because I think when other teams value the audio department as much as we value what everyone is creating, there's just so much more opportunity to make a game feel really, really solid. I think also with everyone being essentially remote right now, it's opened the door for a lot of studios to realize, hey, there is potential in remote work, and freelancers and contractors as well. So it's been good in that regard too. The game industry is so mercurial that I feel like having an in-house job probably isn't better. So there's definitely some benefits of being in-house. Now, with in-house gigs, you have health insurance, which is so important. Having health insurance. You also have benefits. You also have 401ks, a whole bunch of things that you lack when you're a contractor and you have to sort out on your own. I pay a lot of self-employment taxes, which is just horrendous. Thankfully, my husband works at a studio, so I just hop onto his health insurance. But the nice thing about working in-house is I think it's a really, really good way for people to learn about other disciplines, which sometimes you don't really get that opportunity if you're working freelance, depending on the studio or the type of project you're working on. So working in-house, you get to see the actual happenings and the pipelines and what the how different things slot together. And I think that's really, really, really important. It's also a great way to meet other people. And essentially, when you're working in-house, you're kind of like you're networking. I've been in the studios where, unfortunately, we've had layoffs. And thankfully, as folks branch, they help each other. And I think that's a really valuable thing when you are at a studio and you really like working with the people around you. But you're right, the game industry can be very, very volatile. My fella who, again, what is he? Yeah, he's a programmer. When I think there was like a time where in 2 years he had been like at 3 different gigs because they all had layoffs. And he's a programmer. Like, that's one of the most stable disciplines, I feel like, in the industry. Like, I feel like typically it's programmers and designers that have the safer routes, and then animators and environment artists. You don't often find as many audio folk or producers, and I think it's a kind of a silly thing where I ended up going a production route as well. It's like, okay, well, here's this discipline that's not very stable. Let's also pick up skills for this other discipline that's not always as stable. But, it's been great. Like, in understanding production, it's really helped bridge the gap that audio people sometimes have. And it's been good being able to really give the voice to audio departments to make sure that we are heard and we can be that squeaky wheel sometimes to get something fixed. So, I think that was a lot of questions all in a paragraph, but those are some good questions too, because I think a lot of people don't often think about, the benefits of working in house. And a lot of times people are like, "Oh, if you're freelance, then you could take time off whenever." Sure, but when you're not working, you're also not getting paid. So there's that. Um, I can most certainly be working forever, and maybe that pay won't be as good as it would have been in house, or vice versa. There are some opportunities where a studio is willing to pay significantly more if you're working um, off-site. I mean, freelance or contract. Sometimes not. And I think for those that are interested in doing freelance and contract work, the big thing to know is sometimes, yes, the rate looks higher, but it's not. And sometimes that rate is not higher because you have to factor in taxes that are taken out of that. You have to factor in the cost of your equipment or your cost of living or your insurance, um, things like that. And for those that are hiring or potentially hiring a contractor, and you're like, why is this person's rate more than this person is being paid in house? Well, it's because we cover for our own health insurance. You're covering for the experience of that individual and their resources, because it's quite possible this individual might have a plethora of libraries and equipment that your internal team may not have. And you're also factoring in there's just so many different things that come into play. Like, for example, you could have a paycheck of, like, let's say $1,000, let's pretend. I take out taxes of about 33%, which is higher than the normal, but it's a safe number. So that $1,000 paycheck where you're like, yo, nice, is not actually that great, because a good chunk of that is now gone because of taxes. So there's a lot of weird levers that come into play when you move into that realm of contract life. So that's my 2 cents on that. Contract life is great. In-house life is great. Just really depends on what you're looking for and what feels right. For some people, they really like in-house gigs because they have a little more, well, a lot more stability and structure. You know when you're going to work, you know when you're done, for the most part. Now, working contract, that's not always the case. You could be working at some random hour because you were working with someone in China. You might have a meeting with someone over in, Lithuania or something like that, and you might have very, very strange hours while also working with the client that you have in the US. So it's a very much a balancing act, but I think both of them are extremely rewarding, and you can really learn a lot from both realms. What other questions do we have? Nikki's typing. Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's good to type. Thank you, Macmillan. I see you typing too. I mean, I could keep on going and just sharing a whole bunch of stories and things. There's a lot of woes in the industry. There are a lot of great, great things in the industry. Um, it's I don't know. I find it extremely rewarding. Honestly, I'm sad that I didn't know that I wanted to do game audio until much later. I wish I knew when I had started college. I wish I knew before then that this would have been the career, because I think the scary thing for me, at least, was not having formal training for game audio. I was afraid that I was always going to be behind, and that there's always people that know more than me. There's all these people that went to school specifically for audio. But I think that's the great thing about it, that there's so much so much space for audio. There's room for everyone, honestly. Um, and in not having formal training, I think that also gives me a different perspective that's really, really valuable too, because I might not fall into the regular constraints that someone might. I might approach something a little bit more different than another person that may have gone to SCAD or took took specific audio courses at UT or went to Full Sail. And I like that. I like that we all bring different types of perspective. Villain asks, what critical role do game jams play in the development of people's portfolios when they are just getting started in game audio? So I think it's a really good way to learn how to work with a team, and to quickly work on things that may have hurdles. Now, of course, a game jam can be something that lasts a whole month. It could be something that can last a couple of days. I think it's a really, really, really great way to not only make something from start to finish, hypothetically, but learn how to work with people that you might not normally work with. You might be working with Joe, who is the worst human possible because he is just a jerk. And there's a lot of Joes in the industry. But there's a lot of also Frederics that are the most pleasant creatures you will ever find because they're super supportive and they love to help other individuals meet their goals. That's great. So I think in working game jams, you'll find the people that you want to continue working with, and maybe you can even work on other games with them outside of game jam. So I think that's neat. Also, being able to execute on someone's idea, because you're not always going to make the thing that you're interested in. Same with a lot of studios. They might be working on something that they're not fully interested in, but that's where the funds come from. Or they might really love an idea, but have to change it because a publisher wants them to change something. And that might be the case on a game jam. You might really love an idea, but it has to change because some limitations with programming. So I think those are some really valuable lessons to learn in game jams. Mickey, yo, thanks for asking questions. I'm happy to answer them. Hexagon. Karina asks, what's your favorite experience in the games industry? I think there's a lot of really great experiences. For me, one of the early parts that was really, really valuable to me was getting to work on Age of Empires Online. I am a huge Age of Empires fan. I specifically love Age of Empires mythology. And so in college, when I was like, okay, maybe I will work in the game industry, I thought about working for Ensemble. Lo and behold, Ensemble folded. I was like, oh my gosh. Well, okay. And then when I ended up leaving Dallas and coming to Austin, the studio whom I worked with and got hired at was working on Age of Empires Online. And I learned that a lot of the folks from Ensemble went to Robot Entertainment and for making a successor. And I was over the moon because that was extremely exciting to me. And to them, they were excited because they weren't as familiar of the franchise. And I'm like, yo, I got this. Like, we're gonna have priests just wololoing the heck out of everything. And it was wild because that was very much this is how the sausage is made kind of experience, where I learned about the balance of being a fan of a franchise and being a developer, because there were so many things that as a fan, I'm like, we need this, we need this, we need this, and we need this, even if it's just audio. And then learning the limitations we had as a developer. And it's like, okay, well, what is the most valuable? What are the things that fans would really, really, really want? Okay, let's try and get those in there. And that was really neat, just kind of finding that balance between being a fan and developer and contributing to a franchise that was really, really near and dear to me. The game itself wasn't rated very well. And as a fan, I really wish there were certain things that we had done. As a developer, I'm like, yo, we did as well as we could. But I think that was really cool. I also worked on a game for Whole Foods where I did music for sorting vegetables. I think that was a lot of fun. They were like, "Hey, can you make a track that's like, I don't know, like you're in a kitchen or something?" And I'm like, "Yo, I got it." And the track ended up being very much like, I don't know, songs you hear like on the DS, and I really liked that. It was really cute. Like, who goes up to you and asks you to like make music for sorting vegetables? So I was really pleased with that. I'd say every project honestly has um, really valuable experiences, but there are certain ones that have nice little nuggets that you like to remember. Definitely some that don't have some good nuggets, but we forget those as quickly as we can because we need to make space for other projects. What is the best kitchen appliance to use for sound design from your experience? I like this because I really, really love food. Best kitchen appliance. Best kitchen appliance. Well, if I'm going to cheat, I would say a stove because you can put anything on a stove. But if we're talking about an actual appliance, um, hmm, maybe a hand mixer because specifically a hand mixer because you can put a lot of different things in containers that you can manipulate. Like you could put metal objects, you could put food things, you could put cloth, but use a hand mixer that's cheap. But stoves, I think are great because you could put anything in a pan. Not everything is going to make a great sound though. Like I was super excited about recording these little water pellets that I had purchased because I thought they were going to squeal, and they did not. And it was very smelly and it was very lackluster. And I'm like, well, could have used this pan for other things, like I don't know, frying some shrimp or something, and that would have had a better sound. But I think that's the fun thing about recording. There's always something that is unexpected and sounds really cool, and there's also things that don't sound cool, and you're like, oh, okay. But maybe you drop something while trying to record it, and that thing is the piece of gold that you really needed. Recording animals is also really interesting. I took some of my recording gear to record at a farm, and I recorded some goats. And wow, I had never experienced goats before. And they're like very large puppies because they were so curious about things. Like one of them was trying to chew on my headphones, and the other one was like, I'm going to eat your sweater. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. Thanks, buddy. Grant asks, how would you compare composing work with sound design? Which do you like better and which do you find more opportunities for? Now, this is an extremely controversial topic because, and here's what it comes down to. Not every sound designer is a composer. Not every composer is a sound designer. They are different skill sets, but they can also feed into each other. And I say this because um, there are some sound designers that are able to compose, and there's some composers that dabble in sound design but don't necessarily dabble well. There are also sound designers, composers that do sound design, and they're super great. It's controversial because there are a lot of smaller studios that want someone that does both. And again, there are separate skill sets. I do both music and sound design. My sound design is stronger than my composition. Originally, I thought I wanted to do composition for games, but that's not as feasible. I would say doing music is significantly more difficult to get gigs for. Now, doing sound design is still very difficult, or can be very difficult, but you will have more opportunities doing sound design. So, again, I think there's a lot that can feed into each other because being a sound designer and a composer, I would say my music has stronger textures now than it had before. And in regards to sound design, my sound design is stronger now because sound design is like doing compositions, but in a shorter time frame. So when you're composing something, you are telling a whole story. But when you're doing sound design, you're telling that same story, but in a very short time frame. So they're all different types of storytelling. It's like asking if a person that writes columns is the same as a person that writes comics, is the same as a person that makes graphic novels, is the same as a person that writes novels, is the same as a person that writes stage plays. They're all very, very, very different, but they all can kind of feed into each other. I meant to talk about that one earlier, so thank you for bringing it up because I completely forgot. Are there any folks here that are considering pursuing audio for games? I think, audio for games is so interesting because we have so many different types of preferences. Like there are some folks that really like the really in your face type of sounds. There's some that really want things that are extremely visceral. I really like the things that are really quirky. And it's interesting seeing where we have certain likes and then sometimes what types of projects we get put on. And sometimes like, okay, unrelated projects, but still can draw on the same skills. So, for example, I once had interviewed someone that had mainly worked on cartoony sounds, and they wanted to work on. I asked like what types of goals they had, and they wanted to work on horror games, and were afraid that they were not applicable for something like that. It's like actually, no, you're totally applicable, and the reason I say that is because cartoony type games really hit the expressiveness of a sound quickly. They tell that message in a very fast way. Now, horror stuff is almost similar too because you got stuff that's really fast paced and have different types of layers. There's different types of layers to horror. There's different types of layers to comedic timing. It's also like folks that work on casino games. A lot of people bash on that, but casino games I think are a fantastic starting ground for understanding the complexity of sound design. It's like UI, for example. You want something that telegraphs the message really quickly. Is this positive? Is it negative? Is this something that's really generic? Is it common? Is it rare? And maybe even with the music in a casino game, sure, it might be simple, but it's an excellent way to learn about stingers in games. And by stingers, I mean like the events that sometimes bridge to another important element in a game. So it might be something that happens right before a boss battle. That's a stinger. Or something that's, you find this unlockable and it's really cool because you've been searching for that. Something plays, that's usually a stinger. Or, there's a home slice lurking in the corner. Oh, snap. Little quick thing that plays, that's probably a stinger too. And so I think there are so many different areas in audio that really, really, really build off of each other. So I really get upset when I hear elitists. They're like, oh, this person's only worked in casino games. Or, oh, this person's only worked on cartoony stuff. Like, cartoony stuff is great because, like, you learn how to build character. You learn how to make something really unique. And those types of things are fantastic for creature design, especially in things like a horror game or something like that. Like, you want there to be some type of character. So I am just spitballing, and I'm not really sure when we're supposed to end, but I can just keep going until like forever. So please, someone tell me if you need me to stop or if you want me to keep going. Or are there any other questions or what's for dinner?
We have time slot from 7 to 9, so
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, folks, tell me what you want to know. Like if you have like random things of like, hey, what would this sound like? Or, we can even talk about, different ways to design things, or, how would you design the sound of a butterfly? Like, yo, does this butterfly have spooky bones, or like is this a magical Neopets kind of butterfly? Like there's so many different things we can talk about. Please feed me thoughts, or I'm just gonna like continue word vomiting. You laughing at me?
Because you said the spooky butterfly with bones, so I thought that was funny.
I mean, yeah, actually, so like, I mean, what if it were a creepy butterfly with like bones? I mean, bones you can usually.
What's a good bone sound for Halloween?
Yeah, okay. Well, a good bone sound would be wood. You can get a lot of like wood objects and kind of jostle those around. You could even put them inside a jar to give it a little bit of like reverberation too. Um, Surprisingly, wooden wind chimes are really great for stuff like that too. I like that. I have a thing over here called I think a balafon. It's an African instrument, and it kind of has, could easily be a nice little fluttering bone butterfly, right?
Where, what is that, and how do I buy one?
I think I got it from like Amazon. Balafon. Macmillan asks, how crucial are middleware programs such as FMod Studio or Wise in being able to showcase your skills and talents as a sound designer? It really depends on what you're showcasing. So I would say if you are working on a portfolio, it might not matter as much because you're trying to showcase the sound design. Now, if you are trying to showcase your technical skills, that's fantastic. Since a lot of games are using FMod or Wise. I predominantly have seen more Wise and FMod. It really depends on the type of project, though. Some just use straight up vanilla Unreal or Unity or whatever proprietary engine they're using. But I would make sure it's clear on what you're trying to showcase first. Like your bone butterflies. Like I could showcase those bone butterflies without using any middleware. However, I do really like seeing on a resume that someone has experience in working on middleware because it opens the door for a lot of things. However, that's something that can be trained up again. Karina asks, what's your favorite food? Okay, well, I love food. So there's a lot of things that are my favorite foods right now. Uber Eats also just is like this horrifying gateway to like the world, which I love. Tonight I was thinking about eating some mapo tofu, which I really like, but it only can be like a little spicy because I'm like a complete wuss with spice. But I was afraid I was gonna get really burpy now, so I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. So I didn't get any mapo tofu. Instead, I fried up some eggs and some leftover rice I had, which is fine. But I mean, I like pizza, but I became lactose intolerant in 2009, which is really sad because science has not given me cheese that tastes like normal stuff, aside from a lot that tastes like cardboard. Deep dish pizza, however, is great because it can live off of a whole bunch of sauce. Fantastic. I also really love Japanese food, and I really love Korean food. I really love food. In fact, a lot of the clients whom we work with at Team Audio know that I like food now, so sometimes I'll get messages of like this person's waffles that they had that were like glorious, or the other day someone was letting me know what they had for lunch. And this morning someone was sending me pictures of food, and it's like, this is the good life. Like these are the relationships I want to build with people. Like, tell me all of your food stories. Like, those are the best. I once made a small game called Pup Patisserie, and it was a really awful game about Awful as in like I'm not very good at art. And it was about a dog that just wanted to eat a whole bunch of pastries. So yeah, putt patisserie. What's your favorite food to make? Well, I enjoy eating more than I do making, to be honest. I love the idea of making food, but then like I start doing stuff and I'm like, well, I also don't want to clean it, and that's kind of not how it goes. Um, right now, I really like baking, specifically because I really love bread. So maybe baking is the maybe bread baking. I also really like my air fryer. Yo, it's the best. Like you throw some bacon in that, ooh, so crispy and not super soggy. So good. Or if you have chicken nuggets that are in the shape of dinosaurs, because that's really good that way. Is the Whole Foods game still out there somewhere? I don't think it is. Like the Whole Foods game, what are we in? We're in 2020. I think I worked on it 2010, 2011. I think, if not before that. It was really, really simple. It was like a kid's game where, you just kind of learn to match and put like, oh, all the apples go over here. But I named my tracks things like cucumbers and melons and some I named one like chicken katsu. I was really hungry. I'm just a really hungry person in general, so it's also one of my favorite things to record, because when you record food, you also get to eat it for the most part. So, highly recommend recording your food. There is actually, if I don't know how many of you folks have been to Asia Cafe, which is up north. I actually used some ambience that I recorded from there on one of the projects that I was on recently, so that was neat. Of course, I had to make sure that nothing was indicative of where it was from, and none of the English was understandable, but it was neat because I'm like, I remember eating here. I remember people and places. So that was really cool. I like that. Let's see. What else? My favorite games are a lot of the older type of games because I guess I'm an old fart. I really, really love Chrono Cross. Now, I know most people really like Chrono Trigger better, but I think Chrono Cross has better music. That's just in my opinion. I really love Katamari Damacy. Like, that's just a really fun nugget. I really love games like Zombies Ate My Neighbors for SNES and Earthbound, and I'm sure a lot of folks here probably love Earthbound as well. Age of Mythology, which we've already talked about. Eternal Darkness is also one of my favorites, and I believe that was for GameCube. And let's see, we skipped Dreamcast. I really love the Dreamcast also. Space Channel 5 for Dreamcast, and Shenmue 1 specifically. Yes, McMillan says that he jammed out to Chrono Cross OST in high school. Totally. When I was in school, like I know a lot of this has changed now since games are much more mainstream. I didn't know any females that played games. I also didn't realize that it was not a cool thing to do. So I grew up playing a whole bunch of RPGs, and like those were my friends, yo. Like it was great. And my sister, she's 7 years younger than I am, would sit and she kind of, secondhand absorb the RPGs I'd play. And I don't know, it was really cool. I actually hadn't played an FPS until I worked out in Borderlands. That was my first FPS to play ever. And wow, was that a journey, because when you work on a game, you have to play test things. And no one told me any of the command codes to, have God mode on or anything like that. And there I was like, how am I supposed to test this? Like, what's happening? So that was a journey. I don't play as many FPSs still, but Overwatch is fun still. I played some PUBG and was horrendous. Apparently, all I wanted to do was just collect things, so that was really disappointing. But yeah, I think it's always great experiencing different genres, including genres that you're maybe not as familiar with or not as excited about, because it gives you more of an ear to different things and you gain more experience that way too. I'm also glad that we have migrated into the realm of exploration again. Like in the early 2000s, we definitely hit this realm of like, oh, games need to be really gritty and monochromatic and have cinematic scores, which I know some people love, but I don't. Because I think that that's kind of the realm where a lot of people feel like games need to be similar to films, and we don't. We have the room to explore. We have the room to make experiences that are completely unique and as engaging as we want them to be. And I think that's really cool. Like, that's that type of interaction is not something you'd be able to have in your typical entertainment media like films or TV or radio. We have the ability to craft a whole experience that can be unique to an individual player and have the overarching thing be the same across the board, which is, I think, really, really, really interesting. What else, friends? What else? What other questions do we have? Is anything specific that you'd like to hear more about? Any questions that you're like, hey, how did you overcome this thingy? Or what are your thoughts and yada yada? What did you have for breakfast? Stuff like that. I am more than happy to answer any question that folks have. So please ask away. So it's a little bit less of word vomit and actually answering things that you're curious about and would like to hear. Karina asks, any tips for entering the industry? Yes. What everyone says is always going to be different. So don't believe someone when they're like, this is the only way to do blah. Because it's not. It really isn't. I've actually known someone that was previously a food delivery person that ended up getting a job. Now, the industry has changed over the years. I think before, definitely in the early ages, it was very much you don't even have to have experience on X, and you can be you got the gig because you're friends of this person. There's definitely still some of that. There's also nepotism as well, but I think we're in an age where we have so many ways to reach out to people, to be involved in the industry as much or as little as we want, and to network in different ways that were not applicable before. Twitter can be your ally if you use it properly. Same with things like Instagram too, which oddly enough is a place where a lot of musicians really flex as well, which I was not expecting. But I think Twitter, to me at least, is a great way to reach out, get to know other developers, get to know other student developers too, and kind of see what types of projects you like, what types of projects are out there, what people are working on. I think especially if you're still a student, this is the perfect time to collaborate with other students and work on your own games together. Like, I think that's a super important thing for you to do right now. I wish that a lot of folks still had that flexibility. Like, I've known some people that are much later in life and they want to switch careers, and it's difficult for them because they have a lot of either family obligations or monetary obligations that they lack some of the flexibility there. So please use your time wisely, and during this time, reach out to people, ask questions, work on your own things, and hone your craft, because the the big thing is just because you're going to school for a certain degree does not guarantee you will get a job. Just because you have 40,000 followers on Twitter does not guarantee that you will have a job. So I think that type of validation that you might receive online or in having a certain degree, don't let that be your crutch. You need to also have your own drive to achieve your goals. So those are my cat thoughts for you. Catthoughts.com. I don't know. I actually bought that site, by the way, catthoughts.com, because I use that phrase a fair bit, and I was afraid that I did not know what was on that site. So I purchased it. It didn't exist. So, yeah, I think, that's the difficult thing too. There's a lot of students that go to school specifically for X or Y and really feel like they're the perfect fit for a job. Now, why are you a perfect fit for the job? Is it because you went to school for something? Or is it because you have honed your skills for the craft? Or do you have a specific passion for things that are applicable for that job? Really find what makes it interesting to you and what you're passionate about, because it's not their job to find something for you to be passionate in. It's your job to be passionate and want to improve and to get better and want to add value. So ask yourself, like, how can I add value? What makes me a good asset, and what do I need to learn? So for those folks here that may have had similar struggles as me, where perfectionism was really, really drilled in as a child, you really need to work on it, because you are in a vulnerable position as an artist, and not everyone will like what you're making. You will fail a whole bunch, but it doesn't mean that your work is not valuable. It just means it's not what someone's looking for. And that can be a really difficult thing to grasp. For me, I had the hardest time, and I still have a hard time with sharing some of my work, especially work in progress stuff, because I was so afraid people would judge me, that coworkers would judge me, that people would be like, why is she here? Her stuff's not good enough. And don't do that to yourself. That's not going to help you succeed in life. What will help you succeed in life is understanding you could always be better, and you are surrounded with people that ideally will want to help elevate you and help you grow. And you in turn should do the same thing too. Because if you're just out there thinking, only for yourself and that you're the number one nugget, like, a game isn't going to be great if it's not a collaboration of ideas. Like, sure, you could totally make a game with just one person, but there is a human element of interactivity and collaboration that is really important, I think, into making great games. So another catthoughts.com for you. Also, do the thing. Do the thing, do the thing, do the thing. Sometimes folks get really tied up on finding all the gear, getting all the cool things lined up, getting a schedule planned, getting all the right people in place, when really you should just start and learn and make mistakes. The sooner you make mistakes, the sooner you fail, the sooner you can redo things and make it better. It's better that you find what's fun in the game rather than being, 12 months down in production and realizing, oh, our game's not fun. Like, slapping on solid art isn't going to make the game more fun. It's going to look so much prettier. But if your foundation's already sloppy, fail early, fail often. What else we got? We got 6 minutes. Hit me with some heavy topics. What do we want to know? When will the layout for catthoughts.com be updated? That is a solid question. I think I've owned that website for a few years now, and it has not been updated. Maybe one day, just keep refreshing. Macmillan asks, is there one genre of games that you would either A, purposely avoid working on if possible, or B, would never go out of your way to play? It's tricky because honestly, like, I'm interested in working on everything because there's always some interesting hurdles that I find very curious. Like, I am actually quite interested in working in edutainment because I think kids' games are really cool. I purchased a lot of kids' games for my sister growing up, and I really enjoy the format of that and the idea of making education entertaining. What I would here's one. What I would not want to work on are games for like Facebook games on Facebook interface, which I think we are completely done with perhaps now. I was not a fan of games during that era, so would you never go out of your way to play? What would I never? Okay. I don't think there's really something I would necessarily go and try and avoid playing. There's types of games I have not worked on that I am not actively seeking necessarily, but could be neat. Like visual novels could be really neat to work on. But I have not worked on something like that. I don't know. It's a question that is hard because I kind of just want to work on all the things, to be honest. Okay, I will not answer that question because this next question about ducks and horses and yada yada, because I remember. So I actually did a talk before for EGaDS during GDC Squared, and that was one of the questions, and I did not get the reference, and we never covered it. We never talked about it. But I asked someone else about it, and they're like, "Oh, well, this refers to blah." So I'm not going to answer it because I don't remember. So yeah, try again another time. shake the magic 8 ball. Find another question, maybe, or ask me sometime in the future. Oh, but actually you changed it to record. Okay, I'll answer your question now. Would you rather record 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? Depends on what I'm trying to get source for. I think, honestly, one horse-sized duck, because it's hard to get animals. It's hard to isolate an animal when you're doing recordings. A lot of times you can kind of manipulate to make it sound like multiple, but you're a little bit limited when you record animals as a group. Real answer. Although duck-sized horses could be really cute. I don't really think they would give the type of cool sound that you would hope for, though. I think a lot of it would just be like whining. So you might get the same type of sound with puppies, maybe? Puppies and chicken feet scratching on ground, on dirt. So there's your little literal answer. 1 minute. We got 1 minute, friends. So here are some parting words from me. Please reach out. If you have a question somewhere down the line, like maybe it's 5 years from now, please reach out, and I am happy to circle back and answer. It might take a little while. I'm pretty swamped with work right now, but please reach out. I think it's, again, really important to have resources in the industry. And I also love the idea of talking to folks and then talking to them again when they're in the industry and are doing stuff and are excited about what they're working on. I think that's super rewarding. So please reach out. You can follow me on Twitter. I haven't really been active recently, but I'll hop back on there. I am at jelfish67, JELFISH67. I am not born in June or born in the year 67. For whatever reason, I thought 67 was a cool number. And I'm from the earlier times when you used to add numbers at the end of something because that was a thing. Apparently, no, that wasn't a thing for Twitter. So, joke's on me. I'm also, I think everything is linked in my Twitter. So please hop onto Twitter and hit me up there. I think I was, oh my gosh, you're welcome. Thank you for rewording the GDC squared question. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is definitely much more applicable. So I like that. Thank you. Well, we have hit 9:01. Hit me up on Twitter, friends. And again, linked on there are other links to things. You're welcome to email me as well at Kat.Wenske, WENSKE @gmail.com. And I will do my best to circle back and respond to questions in a relatively timely manner. But don't be afraid to follow up again, be like, yo, Kat, you still alive? If it's taken me a little while to respond, I will do my best. But yeah.